Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I always believed that our marriage was built on mutual respect and shared dreams, but lately, I began to sense a creeping erosion of the very foundation I once held dear. Every day after my bartending shifts, I returned home to a world where Brittany's smile no longer carried warmth, but rather a subtle condescension that left me feeling invisible. I tried to dismiss it at first, convincing myself that her playful banter was harmless, yet the sting of her words lingered like a shadow. I remember one evening at a family barbecue when, as we gathered around a long picnic table under string lights, Brittany casually remarked to a group of relatives, "Oh, Kyle, you always try so hard, but some of us are simply born to shine." Her tone was light and breezy, but every syllable struck me like a cold reminder of how unappreciated I was. I could feel every eye in the group shift toward me, their forced smiles amplifying the quiet humiliation that tightened around my chest. I sat there, my mind swirling with questions. Had I become nothing more than an accessory to her vibrant life? At dinner that night, while our children chattered about their day, Brittany interjected with a dismissive laugh when I offered to help set the table, saying, "Don't worry, Kyle, you do so much already by being here. Let the professionals handle the rest." I forced a smile as I cleared the dishes, but inside, the words replayed over and over, each repetition a dagger to my pride. In the solitude of my thoughts that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that every sacrifice I had made, every long shift, every quiet moment spent supporting her dreams was being twisted into a punchline for her amusement. The pain of this emotional neglect, masked by her seemingly carefree laughter, began to compound until I was left questioning my own worth. The turning point came one crisp autumn evening at a friend's restaurant, where the atmosphere was warm and inviting, yet the air was heavy with unspoken tension. Seated at a long table with close friends, I listened as Brittany regaled the group with a story about her latest tattoo session, a term she had used to explain her frequent absences. With a smile that bordered on disdain, she remarked, "Some people just have a natural flair for art and beauty, while others like Kyle can only admire from afar." The words were meant to be a jest, but to me, they were a public declaration that my efforts were insignificant. I felt the heat of embarrassment rising in my cheeks as I heard a stifled giggle ripple through the table. My inner monologue roared. Am I really only here to be overshadowed? Do my sacrifices mean nothing? That night, as I sat alone in our dim living room, the silence around me was deafening. I recalled every dismissive comment and every casual sneer that Brittany had directed at me over the years, and a deep sorrow mixed with burning indignation surged within me. I wondered if my silence was an act of strength or if it was simply eroding the very dignity I was trying to uphold. My heart ached with the realization that I was caught between the desperate need to speak out and the fear of shattering the fragile illusion of our once happy life. In that quiet moment, I made a silent vow to myself. I would no longer allow my worth to be measured by her cruel words. I promised that one day, I would reclaim the respect and dignity that were rightfully mine, even if it meant challenging the very person I had once loved. But for now, as I lay awake in the stillness of the night, I was left with nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal and the uncertain hope that the dawn might bring the courage to change my life. While you're here, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. I arrived at a small gathering of close friends one cool evening, hoping for a reprieve from the daily sting of humiliation, yet the atmosphere that night only served to intensify my inner torment. The living room was filled with soft chatter and clinking glasses, and for a while, I tried to immerse myself in the warmth of familiar faces. However, Brittany's presence loomed large, her laughter and cutting remarks slicing through the pleasant ambience like a cold blade. As the night unfolded, I found myself seated next to acquaintances who had once admired our seemingly happy life. With an ease that betrayed no hint of the underlying malice, Brittany regaled the group with stories about her big tattoo sessions, boasting about the intricate designs she was supposedly getting done. Every now and then, she would cast a side eye at me, as if to remind everyone that I was nothing more than a bystander in her glamorous world. At one point, when a friend complimented my steady work ethic and dedication to the family, Brittany interjected with a smirk, "Oh, look at David, always trying so hard, yet still living in the shadows of my excitement." The words stung sharply, and I could feel the eyes of our friends flicker with uncertain amusement as Brittany's voice lilted over the conversation. I sat there, my heart pounding in time with each sneer that cut into me, feeling the slow buildup of resentment and self-doubt. The more she made light of my contributions, the more I began to question whether my sacrifices were valued at all. My mind was awash with memories of countless times I had quietly endured her relentless jibes, each one a reminder that my efforts were seen as inadequate, that I was somehow less important than her elaborate escapades. As the evening wore on, the tension reached a fever pitch when Brittany, in a moment meant to cement her superiority, leaned forward with a bright smile and declared to the entire room, "Hey, race to David, who always does his best, even if his best isn't nearly enough." I guess some of us were just born to be the supporting cast. A heavy silence fell over the group, and in that crushing moment, every whispered snicker and sideways glance felt like a personal betrayal. I could no longer keep my silence. My heart, pounding with a mixture of indignation and despair, compelled me to speak. I stood up abruptly, my voice trembling initially, but gaining strength as I addressed everyone. "I have given everything for this family, my time, my energy, my heart, and all I receive is ridicule." For an instant, the room seemed to freeze, every person caught in the gravity of my declaration. Brittany's smile faltered, and the confident ease in her eyes wavered, but she quickly masked it with a dismissive laugh. "Oh, David, don't be so dramatic," she said lightly, yet the damage was done. In that charged silence, the weight of my unspoken grievances and years of suppressed hurt cascaded over me. I realized that every sacrifice, every moment spent trying to be the man she expected, had been twisted into a source of mockery. I returned to my seat, my spirit battered, but no longer willing to be diminished, feeling a deep, aching sorrow for what our relationship had become. As the evening drew to a close, I left with a heavy heart, burdened by the painful truth that I was no longer seen as an equal partner, but merely as an accessory to her larger-than-life persona. That night, alone with my thoughts, I knew I had reached a turning point, a realization that my silence was no longer an option, and that my dignity demanded to be restored. I was in the midst of tidying up the study one quiet afternoon when I stumbled upon something that made my heart freeze. I was methodically sorting through a stack of old mail and campaign brochures when my hand brushed against a small, unassuming wooden box tucked away behind a row of dusty books. Curiosity mixed with a sense of foreboding urged me to lift its lid, and inside, on a bed of soft velvet, lay an expensive-looking piece of jewelry, a silver cufflink set engraved with a name I didn't recognize, Leo. My mind raced, and for a long moment, I sat there in stunned silence, trying to piece together the implications of this discovery. I had always trusted Brittany, the vibrant bartender who had become the center of my world, but lately her excuses for missing long hours, claims of getting a big piece done, had started to feel increasingly rehearsed. The cufflinks were far too luxurious for someone claiming to be undergoing a tattoo session, and the name Leo echoed in my thoughts like a bitter refrain. "What is this?" I whispered to myself, my heart pounding as I cradled the box in my hands. Each detail, from the delicate engravings to the undeniable quality of the metal, suggested that these were not mere accessories, but gifts meant for someone special. I recalled the times Brittany had hurried off in the middle of the day, her explanations growing more vague with every session, and a cold suspicion began to take root. My mind raced back to the odd glances and hushed phone conversations I had overheard in our small apartment, each piece now adding to the mounting evidence of her secret life. I spent the next several hours combing through our shared belongings, desperately searching for any additional clue that might confirm my worst fears. In the kitchen drawer, I discovered a receipt from a high-end jeweler that matched the cufflink set in every detail, dated just a few weeks ago, a date when Brittany had claimed she was at work. My heart sank further, and a mix of anger, betrayal, and sorrow flooded my veins. I could feel my throat tightening with the weight of the revelation. The cufflinks were not a gift for me, but a symbol of her clandestine affair with someone named Leo, who I suspected was her tattoo artist. The evidence was mounting, and it struck me that the emotional abuse I had endured, the humiliation, the constant undermining of my worth, was perhaps a means to justify her own infidelity. I sank into the worn armchair, clutching the box tightly as I replayed every dismissive comment, every subtle sneer that Brittany had directed at me over the past months. I wondered how long I had been blind to the truth, how many times I had allowed her artful deception to pass without question. "I can't be the fool in my own home," I murmured, my voice barely audible as I resolved to no longer let the lies continue unchecked. I knew that an impulsive confrontation could only lead to chaos and further humiliation, so I decided instead to gather irrefutable proof. I created a secure folder on my computer and began digitizing every piece of evidence I could find, scanned copies of receipts, photographs of the cufflinks, even snippets of conversation I had overheard on bitter, sleepless nights. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Brittany's repeated claims of big pieces were nothing more than elaborate excuses. As dusk settled outside, I sat in the dim glow of my study lamp, a quiet storm of determination building within me. I understood that I needed to protect not only my own dignity, but also the integrity of our family. With resolve hardening my heart, I made a silent vow. I would document every irregularity, every late-night call, every discrepancy in her stories. I wouldn't let her deceit go unchallenged. The discovery of the cufflink set had been the catalyst. One small, unassuming box had shattered the illusion of trust. Now, armed with evidence and a newfound resolve, I knew I could no longer remain passive. I would collect every shred of truth until I could confront her with undeniable proof, and in doing so, reclaim the respect and honesty that had been stolen from me. I spent the following days consumed by a transformation, a shift from silent acceptance to a cold, calculated determination to expose every falsehood Brittany had spun. The discovery of the cufflink set had shattered my world, but in its shards I found clarity. I began by meticulously organizing every piece of evidence I had collected, scanning receipts, saving screenshots of bank transactions, and transcribing overheard snippets of conversation. Late at night, under the harsh glow of my desk lamp, I drafted a detailed timeline of her absences and secret visits, correlating them with suspicious financial records that painted a damning picture of her double life. "I will not be made a fool in my own home any longer," I murmured repeatedly, the words echoing in the quiet darkness as I vowed to unmask her deceit. I even reached out to a discreet private investigator to gather supplementary proof of her whereabouts during those so-called tattoo sessions, ensuring that every detail was documented and irrefutable. I installed a subtle tracking device on her car without her knowledge, a small act that filled me with a fierce sense of purpose. With each piece of evidence I compiled, my resolve grew stronger, and I started rehearsing what I would eventually say to her. A confrontation not born of impulsive anger, but of meticulously gathered truth. I practiced in front of a mirror, my reflection steadying me as I spoke phrases like, "Your lies end tonight," and "I deserve honesty, not deceit." I even began drafting a final document that would serve as the backbone of my case, a digital dossier labeled Truth Unveiled, where every transaction, every text message, every shadow of suspicion was laid bare in chronological order. One evening, while double-checking the timeline, I received a call from the investigator who confirmed that Brittany had indeed been seen entering a tattoo parlor in a sleek car, an occurrence that contradicted her alibi for that very night. My heart pounded with a mix of vindication and sorrow as I listened to the details. Each word affirmed what I had feared and prepared for. "This is it," I whispered, feeling the icy thrill of impending justice. I spent the following days further refining my strategy, ensuring that I would have every detail accounted for when the moment of confrontation arrived. I even managed to discreetly acquire a counterfeit version of the expensive gift, the cufflink set, so that when I presented my evidence, it would be unmistakable proof of her duplicity. My mind raced with possibilities of how I could turn this evidence against her, not just to expose her betrayal, but to reclaim the dignity and respect that had been stripped away over years of silent suffering. Each piece of evidence was meticulously cross-referenced, annotated, and securely stored on my encrypted drive. In the quiet solitude of my study, I allowed myself a rare moment of introspection, realizing that this battle was not just about punishing her deceit. It was about asserting my worth and integrity, about proving to myself that I would no longer be manipulated by lies. I prepared for the inevitable confrontation, my emotions tempered by the rationality of my newfound purpose. Every action I took, every record I archived, and every detail I verified was a stepping stone toward reclaiming a life built on truth and honor. As I finally closed my digital dossier, I whispered with a resolute finality, "The truth will out, and I will no longer be a victim." That night, as I locked away my files and powered down my computer, a determined calm settled over me, a calm that promised a reckoning was near, one that would forever change the course of my life. I arrived at the upscale restaurant with a mix of trepidation and burning resolve, my heart pounding as I stepped through the polished entrance and into the softly lit dining room. Every step felt weighted with months of silent suffering and meticulous planning. I scanned the room until my eyes landed on Brittany. There, in a secluded booth draped in dark hues, she sat with a man whose relaxed smile and subtle gestures told me everything I needed to know. I watched as he leaned in, passing her a small, elegantly wrapped gift, a token of intimacy that spoke of secrets I had long suspected. Memories of her claiming she was getting a big piece done on her tattoo, a phrase that had become a hollow excuse for her unexplained absences, surged in my mind. Anger, hurt, and betrayal mingled as I recalled every evasive smile, every whispered lie that had chipped away at my trust. Determined not to let this moment pass, I took a deep breath, steeled myself with the weight of the evidence stored securely on my phone, and rose from my seat. With every step toward their table, the soft murmur of conversations fell silent as all eyes turned toward the intruder. I slid into the booth with a calm but resolute demeanor that commanded immediate attention. Brittany's laughter died in her throat, and her companion's smile faltered as I fixed both with a steady, unwavering gaze. "Brittany, we need to talk," I said in a voice that carried both sorrow and resolve. Her eyes widened in shock. "David, what are you doing here?" she stammered, her tone a mix of confusion and panic. I leaned forward, lowering my voice so that our small circle could clearly hear every word. "I'm here because your lies can no longer be hidden. I've seen the texts, the receipts, and I know every detail about those so-called tattoo sessions. They weren't about art. They were about sneaking off for hours with your tattoo artist." A heavy silence fell over the booth. The man shifted uncomfortably, and Brittany's confident facade began to crumble. I don't know what you mean," she managed to say, her voice trembling. I continued, "Don't lie to me, Brittany. I trusted you, believed in our marriage, and every secret excuse you offered just confirms that you chose to live a double life. Look at these." I opened a folder on my phone and scrolled through the damning screenshots and bank transactions. These are not the marks of a dedicated wife, but of someone who traded our vows for stolen moments and lavish gifts. Her eyes darted between the phone and mine as her composure wavered. "I never wanted you to find out this way," she whispered, almost inaudibly. "Then you should have been honest with me," I replied, my voice thick with hurt. "I spent too many years sacrificing my dignity, enduring your public jabs and your constant undermining. I have every detail recorded, every lie laid bare. Your secrets are no longer mine to bear." At that moment, the surrounding diners fell into a hush, the ambient noise a distant murmur compared to the charged silence enveloping our table. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the realization of her crumbling world. Yet even as she tried to form a plea, I rose, the folder still clutched tightly in my hand, a symbol of every broken promise. "Goodbye, Brittany," I said quietly but firmly. "I hope you learn what it means to live with your choices." With that, I turned and walked out of the booth, each step carrying a mixture of victorious clarity and the deep, unyielding ache of betrayal. Outside, as the cool night air embraced me, I felt a bittersweet relief knowing that the truth was finally out, even if it came at the cost of a love I once cherished. I drove home in a haze of conflicting emotions, the adrenaline of the confrontation at the restaurant slowly giving way to a heavy, lingering sorrow. Every mile I traveled back to our house felt like a step away from the life I once believed I had, yet also a step toward reclaiming my dignity. When I pulled into the driveway, the familiar sight of our home offered no comfort, only the stark reminder of what I was leaving behind. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, my hands still shaking from the intensity of the evening. As I entered the quiet foyer, I could sense the tension that had long festered in the corners of our once shared space. I barely had time to set my bag down when I heard hurried footsteps coming from the living room. Brittany appeared at the top of the stairs, her eyes wild with a mix of fury and desperation, her posture rigid, as if she were ready to battle. "Kyle, what the hell did you do?" she demanded, her voice sharp and echoing off the bare walls. I took a moment to steady my voice, meeting her gaze with a newfound resolve that had been forged over months of silent suffering. "I did what I had to do, Brittany. I exposed your lies," I said, each word deliberate and heavy with years of pent-up frustration. She stepped forward, her expression contorting between anger and disbelief. "Expose my lies? You humiliated me out there. You made a scene in front of everyone," she snapped, gesturing wildly, as if to reclaim some semblance of control. I shook my head slowly, my voice calm despite the storm inside. "Your excuses, your so-called tattoo sessions, they were just a cover. I trusted you, and you betrayed that trust by sneaking off with your tattoo artist. I have all the evidence, and I won't let you manipulate me any longer." Her eyes flashed with a desperate plea as she tried to turn the conversation. "You don't understand, Kyle. I did it for us so that we could have a better life. I thought the extra money and attention would help us get ahead," she pleaded, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and regret. I took a steadying breath, my heart aching with the weight of her words, yet firm in my decision. "No, Brittany, you did it for yourself. Every lie, every excuse was a step away from our marriage. I spent too many years swallowing my pride and pretending nothing was wrong, but I can't do that anymore." She stepped closer, her tone shifting to one of vulnerability as she reached out, as if to pull me back into the familiar chaos of our past. "Please, Kyle, think about the kids. They need a mother. We can work this out. I can change. You don't have to leave," she said softly, her voice a fragile whisper that barely masked the desperation beneath. I felt a pang of sorrow at her words, but the clarity of my resolve eclipsed any lingering affection. "The kids deserve the truth, Brittany, not a web of lies and half-truths. I can't live in a home where my worth is diminished by your actions. I deserve honesty, and I deserve to be respected," I replied, my tone firm and unyielding. For a long, heart-wrenching moment, the silence between us was punctuated only by the sound of our heavy breaths. I looked into her eyes, searching for the person I once knew, but all I saw was someone lost in a labyrinth of deceit. "I'm leaving, Brittany," I said finally, the words echoing with finality. "I can't keep sacrificing myself for a love built on lies." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out of the living room, my steps measured yet resolute as I made my way to the front door. The cool night air hit me as soon as I stepped outside, and with each step away from our home, I felt the burden of betrayal lift ever so slightly. The house faded into the distance behind me, a symbol of the life I was leaving and the life I was determined to rebuild. I walked into the law firm's conference room with a heavy heart and a sense of finality, the evidence of Brittany's betrayal clutched tightly in my hand. The room was cool and quiet, its sterile air contrasting sharply with the turmoil I had endured over the past months. Sitting across from me was my lawyer, a composed man whose calm presence lent me a sliver of hope amid the wreckage of my marriage. "Kyle," he began in a measured tone, "the documents you've gathered are compelling. We have receipts, text messages, even photos that clearly show Brittany's secret life with her tattoo artist." I nodded, feeling a mix of vindication and sorrow as I recounted every painful detail. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the discovery of evidence that confirmed what I had long suspected. I explained how Brittany had been using her tattoo sessions as a ruse, a cover to meet her lover, all while leaving me to shoulder the burden of our life together. My lawyer leaned forward, tapping his pen against a stack of printed emails and bank statements. "We're going to file for divorce, Kyle. I'll present all of this in court." Brittany's attempts to portray herself as the victim will crumble once the truth is laid out, he assured me. I recalled how, in our previous confrontation at the restaurant and later at home, Brittany had tried desperately to manipulate the narrative, twisting my words and painting me as the unreasonable husband. Now, with every piece of evidence meticulously organized in my digital dossier, I felt a resurgence of strength. I looked at my lawyer and said, "I want this case to be about more than just our personal grievances. I want everyone to know the truth about her betrayal." He nodded solemnly. "Your credibility, combined with undeniable proof, will shift the balance in your favor. We have every document needed to show that Brittany's actions were not just hurtful, they were a deliberate betrayal." As we discussed strategy, I remembered the moments of humiliation, the nights I had spent awake, replaying every dismissive remark and every sneaky lie. Now, as I sat in that conference room, the weight of those memories was transformed into a tool for justice. My lawyer outlined our plan. We would file the divorce, and during mediation, I would present the evidence piece by piece, leaving no room for her to twist the narrative. "They'll see that you were the victim all along," he said firmly. I could feel my resolve hardening with each word. After the meeting, I stepped out into the late afternoon sun, the cool air brushing my face like a promise of renewal. I drove home slowly, reflecting on how far I had come, from the depths of humiliation and betrayal to this moment of righteous determination. In the solitude of my car, I whispered to myself, "I won't let her lies define me. I deserve a life built on honesty and respect." That evening, while reviewing more documents on my laptop, I received an email from a mutual acquaintance who had heard rumors about Brittany's secret lifestyle. The message confirmed details I already knew, and it strengthened my conviction that the truth would prevail. With every document stored and every witness lined up to testify, I felt a cautious optimism. I began drafting a personal statement that detailed not just the evidence, but the emotional toll of enduring a marriage where my contributions were reduced to a punchline. "I have given my all," I wrote, "and I refuse to be demeaned by deceit." As I closed my laptop, I looked at a framed photograph of happier times and felt a bittersweet mixture of loss and liberation. I knew the road ahead would be long and filled with more reliving of past wounds. But I also knew that every step in this legal battle was a step toward reclaiming my life. In that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I embraced the truth that justice was not about revenge. It was about restoring my dignity and rebuilding a future free from the shadows of betrayal. I moved into a modest apartment on a crisp autumn morning, the kind of place that promised a fresh start and a chance to rebuild a life defined by my own terms. Every morning, as I woke to the soft glow of sunrise filtering through simple curtains, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet rebellion against the painful past that had once weighed me down. The apartment, though unadorned, quickly became a sanctuary where every room echoed with possibilities of healing and rediscovery. I spent my days reconnecting with my passions. The art of mixology that had once defined my work as a bartender now transformed into a creative outlet as I began designing new, innovative cocktails for local events. I also dedicated time to my children, whose laughter and innocent questions reminded me that love and stability were still within reach. I recall one afternoon in the park when my daughter tugged at my hand and asked, "Dad, do you think you're happy now?" I knelt down to her level, meeting her curious eyes with a gentle smile, and said, "I'm finding happiness, little one day at a time." Those words, simple yet profound, echoed in my heart as I began to embrace the newfound freedom that separation had granted me. In the weeks that followed, I discovered the true value of self-care and self-respect. I immersed myself in community projects and even took up a part-time course in business management, eager to expand my horizons and rebuild a career that I had once set aside for the sake of a crumbling marriage. My colleagues at a local startup welcomed my ideas and recognized the strength that had carried me through the storm. Every compliment, every acknowledgement of my hard work reinforced the belief that I was capable of much more than I had ever imagined. Meanwhile, I kept a discreet eye on Brittany's unraveling life. Social media posts and word of mouth revealed that her once confident facade was giving way to public humiliation. Friends who had once admired her began whispering about her mistakes, and her visits to the tattoo parlor, once filled with excitement, now seemed like desperate attempts to cling to a fading image. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall, only a sober acknowledgement that every choice had consequences and that my path to healing was irrevocably separate from hers. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my new home with a warm cup of coffee and watched the city lights flicker below, I reflected on how far I had come. I remembered the nights filled with self-doubt and the crushing weight of betrayal, and I marveled at the strength I had discovered within myself. I realized that leaving Brittany had not only freed me from a web of deceit, but had also opened the door to a life where every decision was mine to make. I found solace in small moments, quiet walks along tree-lined streets, heartfelt conversations with trusted friends, and the unspoken bond one shared with my children. Each day, I grew more confident, more determined to build a future founded on honesty and respect. I even began exploring the possibility of new relationships, meeting people who valued transparency and kindness over empty promises. The journey was not without its challenges. There were days when old memories would surge back, and the ghost of what I had lost would momentarily cloud my vision. Yet, in those moments, I reminded myself that the pain of the past was merely a stepping stone to a brighter future. I embraced therapy and joined a support group where I learned that healing was a gradual process, a mosaic of small victories and hard-won lessons. Standing on the precipice of my new life, I understood that every scar was a testament to my resilience, every setback a lesson in strength. And as I looked out over the quiet city, bathed in the gentle hues of dusk, I whispered to myself, leaving her was the best decision I ever made. In that serene instant, I knew that my future would be built on the foundations of truth, self-respect, and the unyielding belief that I deserve happiness, no longer defined by the betrayal of the past, but by the promise of a life reclaimed. I watched as the universe began to balance the scales, a slow but unmistakable unraveling of the life Brittany had so meticulously crafted. In the weeks following our painful separation, news reached me in snippets. A once charismatic bartender, now shunned by old friends, whispers at local hangouts, and even a few accusatory glances from former regulars at the bar where she once worked. I learned that her tattoo artist, the man with whom she had betrayed our vows under the guise of tattoo sessions, had finally grown tired of her erratic behavior. One evening, while I was reviewing community updates on my phone, a message from a mutual acquaintance confirmed, "Brittany's been let go. Her reputation is in tatters." I felt no joy in her downfall, only a bittersweet satisfaction that the consequences of her actions were coming to fruition. Professionally, my own life continued to blossom. I had slowly rebuilt my reputation with a quiet dignity that resonated with those who believed in integrity. Colleagues and old friends recognized the resilience in my story, and each compliment, every nod of approval, reaffirmed my decision to walk away. At community events, my voice was heard and respected, a stark contrast to the humiliation I once endured. I even received a congratulatory call from a friend, saying, "Kyle, you've not only turned your life around, you've set a powerful example for everyone who's been wronged." I carried those words close as I reflected on how the chain of events had reshaped my existence. Brittany's world, once built on glamour and deceit, was now a labyrinth of isolation. Invitations to events dwindled, and even her loyal patrons began to question her credibility. I overheard snippets in passing, like at a neighborhood cafe, where someone remarked, "I heard Brittany's been cut off by her new clients. No one wants to be associated with scandal." Every piece of information added another layer to the realization that while I was forging a future defined by truth and honor, hers was disintegrating into a series of regrets. One particularly quiet night, as I sat alone on my porch watching the city lights flicker in the cool evening breeze, I allowed myself a moment of introspection. The past was filled with bitterness and betrayal, yet I no longer needed revenge to feel whole. I whispered to the night, "The truth has its own justice, and my life is proof that integrity prevails." In that moment, a sense of profound peace settled over me. I understood that my journey had been about reclaiming my dignity rather than inflicting suffering. Brittany's choices had led her down a path of isolation and despair, a path from which there was no easy return. The legal battle was behind me, and every day I built a future that was not defined by the scars of betrayal, but by the strength I had discovered along the way. I realized that true justice was not about watching someone else suffer, but about freeing myself from the chains of deception and embracing the rewards of honesty. With each new achievement, be it in my career or in the genuine connections I forged, I felt that old pain dissolve, replaced by a steady, unshakable resolve. I no longer needed to dwell on the past, for my present was rich with hope, self-respect, and the promise of a better tomorrow. As I closed my eyes that night, I smiled softly, knowing that my life, rebuilt on the foundations of truth, was the ultimate testament to the power of resilience. The day had come when I no longer craved revenge, for the real victory was in the quiet triumph of reclaiming my identity and forging a future that shone brighter than any darkness left behind. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.